I am refusing to invite my mom to my wedding because of the past. She says I am destroying the family. I say I am finally protecting it. I am a 29-year-old woman, and I sent out 112 wedding invitations last week. My mother did not receive one. She found out through my aunt 3 days ago. She has called me 44 times since. I have answered twice. This is the story of why my mother will not be at my wedding, and why that decision is the most loving thing I have ever done for myself. The mother I had. I want to be careful here because I know how these stories can sound. I do not think my mother is a monster. I think she is a deeply damaged person who never got help and passed her damage to me like a gift she thought she was giving. She grew up hard. I know that. Her father was absent. Her mother was harsh. She was raising me alone by 22 after my father disappeared when I was 2 years old. I understand those things shaped her. But understanding why someone hurts you does not mean you have to keep accepting the hurt. My mother loved me the way she knew how to love. Loudly. Desperately, suffocatingly, conditionally. She was the kind of mother who said, "I love you," and then used that love as a weapon in the same breath. "I love you, which is why I need you to do this. I love you, which is why I am telling you this for your own good. I love you, which is why you owe me better than this." Love was not a gift in my house growing up. Love was a transaction. A debt. A leash. The childhood. When I was 8, my mother went through a bad period. Job loss. Money problems. Loneliness. I did not know the details. I just knew the effects. She would cry for hours and ask me to sit with her. Not for minutes. For hours. A second grader on the couch next to her mother at 10 p.m. because mom needed company and I was the only one there. I learned that my job was to manage her emotions. I learned that her bad days were my responsibility. I learned that when she was suffering, I was supposed to make it better. By 12, I was her therapist, her confidant, her emotional support. She told me things children should not hear about adult pain, about loneliness, about feeling unloved, about regretting choices. Not occasionally, constantly. I held her grief from the time I was old enough to hold anything, and she held nothing for me. When I was sad, she made it about how my sadness was hard for her. When I was scared, she talked about her own fears until mine disappeared under the weight of hers. When something good happened to me, she found a way to make it about her needs somehow. My 9th grade science fair win became a conversation about how she wished she had had opportunities like mine. My first relationship became a weeks-long interrogation about whether I would leave her for him. My college acceptance became a breakdown about how she would manage without me. I moved to a university 4 hours away. She called me every day, sometimes twice, not to ask how I was, to tell me how she was. The pattern was consistent for 29 years. Whatever I needed was secondary to whatever she needed. And what she always needed was me, fully available, fully focused, fully hers. When I got my first apartment, she said it felt like a betrayal. When I took a job that required occasional travel, she cried that I was choosing my career over her. When I started seriously dating my now fiancé, Daniel, she said she could feel me pulling away, and it was killing her. Everything I did to build my own life felt to her like something I was doing to her. Every step of independence registered as abandonment. I spent years trying to explain this was not true. That I loved her, that I was not leaving, that building my own life did not mean destroying hers. She could not hear it. She could only feel the distance. And the distance was always my fault. The incidents. There are too many incidents to list all of them, but there are some I need to name. When I was 23, I had a miscarriage from a pregnancy that was not planned, but that I had quietly started to hope for. I was devastated. Alone in my apartment. Bleeding and afraid and grieving something I had not even known I wanted until it was gone. I called my mother. She said, "Oh no, that is terrible. Do you know what this is doing to me? The thought of losing a grandchild. I can barely breathe." She cried for 40 minutes about her grief. I said nothing. I held the phone and bled and listened to her and said nothing. When I was 25, I was in a car accident. Minor. I was not seriously hurt, but I was shaken and my car was damaged and I had to sit on the side of a highway for 2 hours waiting for a tow truck. I called her. She said, "Are you okay?" I said I was scared and shaken, but physically okay. She said, "Do you know how terrifying this is for me? To get a call like this? I have been having heart palpitations since you said the word accident. You need to think about how these things affect other people." I apologized to her. I apologized to my mother for being in a car accident. When I was 27, Daniel proposed. I called her immediately, full of joy.
She said, "Oh, well."
I suppose that is happening then. I asked if she was happy for me. She said, "I just wonder what happens to me now." You will have your own family. Where do I fit? Not congratulations. Not I am so happy for you. Where do I fit? I sat in my car in the parking lot of the restaurant where Daniel had just proposed and listened to my mother wonder aloud where she fit in my happiness. The breaking point. The engagement party was 8 months ago. Daniel's parents threw it at their home. Warm and generous people who have welcomed me the way I always wished family could feel. 50 people.
Backyard.
String lights. Everything lovely. My mother arrived and within 45 minutes had managed to position herself as the centerpiece of the event. She pulled Daniel's mother aside and told her a 20-minute story about how hard it had been raising me alone and how she hoped Daniel understood the sacrifice that went into making me who I am. She interrupted my conversations with guests to tell stories about my childhood that were not flattering. Stories that embarrassed me in front of Daniel's friends and family. She cornered Daniel before dinner and told him that I had emotional needs he probably did not fully understand yet and that she would always be available to help him manage me. She told him she hoped he knew what he was getting into. Not warmly. Not as a joke. She said she hoped he knew what he was getting into. When I found out what she had said to him, I went quiet. Daniel held my hand. He said, "She was trying to undermine you. At our engagement party. In front of my family." I said, "I know." He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I need to think." I spent 3 weeks thinking. The decision. I talked to my therapist. I talked to Daniel. I talked to my best friend Maya, who has known me for 15 years, and watched my mother operate up close. I read everything I had written in my journal about my mother over the past 4 years. And I made a decision. My mother was not coming to my wedding. Not as punishment. Not out of anger, because every significant moment of my life had been shadowed by her need to be the central emotional event in the room. Because she had told my fiancé she hoped he knew what he was getting into at the party meant to celebrate us. Because she had spent 29 years teaching me that my joy was a resource she was entitled to access and redirect toward herself. Because I deserved one day. One single day. That was mine without managing hers. I talked to Daniel first. He said, "It is your decision, but I support it completely." I talked to my therapist. She said, "This is a significant boundary. Are you prepared for the reaction?" I said, "I have been preparing my whole life." She said, "Then I think you already know what you need to do." The letter. I did not call my mother to tell her. I wrote her a letter. I spent 4 days writing it. Not an angry letter. Not a letter designed to wound her. A true letter. I told her I loved her. I told her I understood she had been through hard things. I told her I knew she did not always mean to cause harm. And then I told her the truth about what her behavior had cost me. The miscarriage phone call where I apologized to her for being in a car accident. The engagement party where she told my fiancé she hoped he knew what he was getting into. The 29 years of learning that my emotions were inconvenient and hers were my responsibility. I told her that my wedding was the day I was choosing to start my life with the person I love, and that I needed that day to belong to me, not to be a stage for her grief about my independence. I told her she was not invited. I told her I was not closing the door on our relationship forever. I told her that if she was willing to do the work, to see a therapist, to understand the damage of what I had named, there could be something real between us someday. But that something real required honesty. And honesty required starting with this. I mailed the letter. 3 days later she called. The calls. First call I answered. Her voice was quiet. like she was holding herself very carefully. She said, "I got your letter." I said, "I know." She said, "You are not inviting me to your wedding." I said, "No." She said, "Because of things from the past." I said, "Because of a pattern that has never stopped." The engagement party was 3 months ago. She said, "I was trying to help." I said, "You told my fiancé you hoped he knew what he was getting into." At our engagement party, in front of his family, she said, "I was trying to prepare him. You have needs. You have always needed a lot of support." I said, "I need support that you have never provided. What I have always provided is support to you." She said, "I do not know what you are talking about." And that was the thing. I believe she did not know. I believe she genuinely had no awareness of the pattern. That is not an excuse. But it changed my voice when I spoke again. I said, "I know you do not. That is part of the problem. And that is why I need you to see a therapist before we can have a real conversation about any of this." She said, "So you're just cutting me out?" I said, "I am setting a boundary. If you want to understand the difference, ask a therapist." She started crying. I said, "I love you, Mom. I will talk to you again when you have taken some steps toward understanding what I wrote." I hung up. The 43 other calls. She called 43 more times over the next 3 days. I did not answer any of them. The voicemails ranged from crying to angry to pleading to accusing. Some were long. Some were just silence, and then the sound of her putting the phone down. One was her telling me she had done nothing wrong her entire life, and I was inventing problems to justify hurting her. One was her saying she would not come to the wedding even if I invited her after this. One was her saying she had already told my aunt and that the whole family would know what I had done. One was her saying she was sorry in a voice that did not sound sorry. One was just crying for 4 minutes and then a hang-up. I saved them all. Not to use against her. Just because I needed to remember that my decision was right. That this was the pattern. That every time I tried to set a boundary, she escalated until I gave in. I was not giving in this time. The family response. My aunt called. She said, "Your mother is devastated." I said, "I imagine she is." She said, "How can you do this to her?" I said, "I have made a decision about my own wedding guest list. That is not doing something to her." She said, "She is your mother. Whatever she has done, she is still your mother." I said, "Yes. And I still love her. But love does not require me to invite someone to my wedding who has spent decades centering herself at my expense." My aunt was quiet. Then she said something I did not expect. She said, "I have watched your mother your whole life. I have seen how she leans on you. I have worried about it for years." I said, "Then you understand." She said, "I understand more than your mother knows I do. I am not calling to pressure you. I am calling because I love you, and I wanted to hear your voice." That undid me a little. I said, "Thank you for that." She said, "Your wedding is going to be beautiful. I will be there. She will be one of the people in the seats. My mother will not." The preparation. Daniel and I sat together one evening last week and talked about what we wanted the day to feel like. He said, "What does your best version of that day look like?" I thought about it. I said, "Present. I want to be present. Not managing anyone. Not watching a corner of the room for a crisis forming. Not apologizing for my own joy." He said, "Then that is what we're going to build. We have a plan. My best friend Maya will be my point of contact for anything that needs managing. Any family members who might be volatile have been briefed by Daniel's mother gently and kindly. The day has been designed around presence and peace. Not around managing my mother's emotions. Because she will not be there to generate them. For the first time in 29 years, I get to have a day that belongs entirely to me. I have cried about that 3 times. Not from sadness. From something that feels like relief, so deep it has nowhere to go, but out through your eyes. The grief. I want to be honest about something. This is not triumphant. I am not celebrating. There is grief in this decision that sits alongside the clarity. I grieve that my mother is who she is. I grieve that I spent so long hoping she would change. I grieve that she will not be in my wedding photos. That the version of this I imagined as a little girl included a mother who could be present for me. That version of the story never came true. And grieving it is not the same as questioning my decision. I can be sad that I do not have the mother I needed and still know that protecting my wedding day is right. Both things are true at the same time. My therapist calls this the double grief. Grieving what happened and grieving what did not. I am sitting in it, letting it move through me, not around it. What I want her to know. I have thought about what I would say to my mother if she could really hear it. If the defenses came down. If the wound of not being invited could be set aside long enough to actually listen. This is what I would say. I love you. I have always loved you. Even when loving you was the hardest thing I had to do. I do not think you are a bad person. I think you were a hurt person who did not know how to get better, and so you kept passing the hurt around. I do not blame you for everything. But I cannot absorb everything forever. I needed a mother, and I became a therapist instead. That was not fair to either of us. I am not closing the door. I am putting a lock on it that can only be opened from your side. The combination is honesty and effort, and a real therapist who can help you see what I could not make you see. I hope you find it. I genuinely hope you find it. Because I would like to have a mother someday. Not the mother I had. A new one. Built on truth instead of transaction. I do not know if that is possible. But I am leaving the door in place instead of tearing it down. That is the most love I have left right now. And I think that is enough. 6 weeks until the wedding. 6 weeks until the day. My mother has not called in 8 days. The longest stretch since I sent the letter. I do not know if she is processing, getting help, or simply furious and frozen. I do not know which of those things would be better. Daniel brought home flowers last Tuesday for no reason.
Just because.
Oliver the cat, who belongs entirely to Daniel but has decided to sleep on my pillow, climbed onto my lap last night while I was reading and stayed for 2 hours. My best friend Maya came over last weekend, and we addressed envelopes and drank wine, and she made me laugh until I could not breathe. Life is happening around this grief and around this decision, and it is good. Actually good. The wedding will be good. I will be present. I will be held by people who came because they love me, not because they love what they can take from me. That is new, and new things take getting used to. But I am ready. For everyone asking, do you think you will regret not inviting her? I think I would have regretted inviting her more. I have thought about both versions. The version where she comes and finds a way to make it about her pain, and the version where I am present in my own day without managing hers. I choose presence. What if she gets therapy and changes? Then we will have a conversation. Slowly. With evidence.
With time.
That door is real, and I mean it. Do you feel guilty?
Yes.
Guilt and clarity at the same time. I am learning they can coexist. What does Daniel think? He has been my steadiest support through all of this. He said once that watching me set this boundary was one of the most courageous things he had ever seen. That meant more than I can say. What would you tell someone in the same situation? You are not required to perform joy through your pain. You are not required to share the most important day of your life with someone who has spent years treating that joy as their resource. Your wedding is yours. Protect it. You will not regret choosing yourself. Are you okay? I am more okay than I have ever been. And that is the truest thing I have said today.
And
I am refusing to invite my mother to my wedding because of the past. She says I am destroying the family. I say I am finally protecting mine. 112 invitations went out. Hers was not among them. And for the first time in 29 years, I am building something that belongs entirely to me. Nobody warned me that choosing yourself could feel this much like grief and freedom at exactly the same time. But here I am. In both of them at once. And still moving forward.